Well, welcome all you wiretappers out there back here in the studio, Gangland Wire. I have, as you can see, if you're on YouTube, I have our good friend Camilla's Cam Robinson. Welcome, Cam.
Hey Gary, how you doing?
He's my go-to guy for Chicago outfit stuff. You are, Cam. You're my go-to guy.
I love being on. You know I do.
I know you do. And we're going to get you and Paul Whitcomb back on here one of these days soon, too. You understand you came up, you did some research about some other outfit stuff. So you got a lot of raw data there somewhere, 1,000 pages of it, right?
I did. I pulled up some great government documents. We're going to get into that before too long. I know we are.
All right. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Alan Dorfman. And the question, as you can see from the title, the question is, why was Alan Dorfman killed? I think we kind of know Joey Lombardo probably had something to do with it. And Frank Suisse, maybe. There's a couple other names mentioned. I can't remember what other names were mentioned in that hit.
One of the names I've always heard was Paulie Shiro. I think that Paulie Shiro could have come out and been a guy. I think Paulie Shiro was involved in a hit that took place up in Milwaukee. He was sort of a go-to guy, somebody that nobody around Chicago knew.
Yeah.
And he was known to be a hitter. He was somebody who was involved in the family secrets trial, not for Alan Dorfman, but that was a name that's always been bandied about.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you said, he's not really known in Chicago. And Paulie Shiro, Paulie the Indian, he was a long-time outfit hitman and burglar and all-around criminal who had moved to the Southwest. I believe, was it
right
Phoenix or Albuquerque, somewhere out.
Right, and he was Spilatro's guy, which would have put him in line from Lombardo,
right.
which makes sense. And, Lombardo would have been plugged in, and Irving Weiner was basically tight with Lombardo, and Irving Weiner was with Dorfman when he was killed. So this was an outfit hit because Weiner was so juiced in with the outfit.
Right, and they had a history of Irving Weiner and Joey Lombardo and the Teamsters and Dorfman because of the Danny Seifert murder, and that business that Seifert had that was tied into the Teamsters. He had a lot of you may know the story if you're on Facebook at all and you see Joey Seifert, the Facebook out there, and the book that they wrote, the Seifert Sons. Danny Seifert was kind of an outfit businessman. He took some Teamsters money and he let Joey Lombardo partner with him, and Irving Weiner, I believe, did too, was a partner in that fiberglass company. And then FBI was putting pressure on him, and I believe Seifert was indicating he might testify, and Lombardo, Frank Suisse came in and killed him, and that was part of the family secrets trial there.
Right. They were using that business to launder pension funds, and it went back to Felix Alaricio, Milwaukee Phil. And he was tight with the Seifert family. It was one of many businesses they were using to launder those Teamster funds. And it really came to a head when IRS agents were talking to Seifert.
Yeah. So Alan Dorfman was wrapped up in the outfit, and particularly with Joey Lombardo and kind of that faction of the outfit, because Lombardo, he was this wiretap we're going to eventually listen to. Actually, it's a microphone that was in Dorfman's office. Lombardo was in there almost every day with Dorfman and talking about different things and making phone calls, and he was kind of like the outfits guy to monitor Alan Dorfman. And so let's go back just a little cursory history of Alan Dorfman. His father was Red Dorfman, was a long time connected, a union guy, got connected with the outfit back in the 30s, probably.
Yeah, he was tied in with the waist haulers union. He had no history with the waist haulers union. The then guy who founded the waist haulers union was murdered. Red Dorfman, who had no history, shows up at a meeting for the waist haulers union and is immediately voted in as secretary, treasurer, and president of the waist haulers union. Now, I don't know if that was suspicious at the time, but 1939 was he just It was
moved in,
fortuitous for the outfit and Red Dorfman.
As Gomer Pyle would say, surprise, surprise, surprise.
Right.
Supposedly,
So
Red Dorfman's the guy that introduced Hoffa into his relationship with the outfit. Is something I've read.
Exactly. He brought Hoffman into the outfit, and because he founded that pension was one of many that were folded into the Central States Pension Fund. And Hoffa, became close with the outfit through Red Dorfman, and likewise, Alan Dorfman became close with Hoffa through his stepfather, Red.
Right. And Alan Dorfman said this is all pre-war. During the war, as with many men, he went away, and he actually, I believe I read he won the Silver Star.
Yeah.
And I've read about other mob guys that went away to war. Everybody went to war back then. If there was any way, they went away to war. And kind of a war hero, came back, and he started out, he was a physical education teacher at University of Illinois, I think, or a college there.
He was a college graduate.
Yeah, and he was this bright guy. He was known as the rabbi on the wiretaps. They always called him, they referred to Dorfman, they referred to him by name. They referred to him as a rabbi, or up north, the rabbi up north. You knew that was Alan Dorfman when we were talking about him.
Yeah.
There was one little snippet from some of these other wiretaps where he says, to maneuver money, you got to be in the gambling business. He became a millionaire during the 50s because he had formed this amalgamated insurance company, and he got, all the pension funds to manage. He got a piece of all that off the top, of course, of fees. And he also was selling insurance to the Teamsters. And so he did really well quickly.
He was in 1953, before he had control, before the Teamsters pension had even been put together by Hoffman. In 1953, he had all the union business in Chicago. His commissions were $600,000 a year in 1953. Now, those are 1953 dollars. Wow. You can do the math. I can't right now.
But it's big.
It's a lot of money in that.
Yeah, it's $2 or $3 million in today's dollars. So, yeah, you had $600,000 in 1953 when a car cost you $1,000, and you were lucky.
That's a lot of cars.
You could hardly make $1.25 an hour was a big time salary. So that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Joy Lombardo, one other player in this thing, as we talk about the murder of Alan Dorfman, who might have did it, who had, I guess, the desire to have him murdered, who feared what he could do, how he could hurt him the most. And Joy Lombardo, of course, or Lumpy, he had a lot to fear from Alan Dorfman coming in and testifying.
Oh, yeah.
A ton. He came up with the Grand Avenue crew. He'd been a good thief, and he wasn't a great big tough guy. He was more of a fun guy, but he's probably the kind of guy that would come in and just say, hey, you need to pay this money.
Right.
Not, somebody else will be around. I figure he was that kind of guy. There's that famous video of him. Camera people are following him, and he goes into this drugstore, and then there's some woman there, something he doesn't even know. He walks up to her and he starts joking with her, and he puts his arm around her. Here, let's pose for the cameras. And you can see this confused look in her face, like, what the hell's going on?
Right. He was also a killer, though. He made his bones in the early 60s. He really did. So for all his laughing and joking and playing and newspaper ads and call Ron Kumpke and my parole officer, he was a very murderous guy. So he was sort of both sides of the coin, which is why I think there's so much interest in him. Is he could really play the clown, and he could really take you out when he had to. It's a really, really interesting dichotomy with him. Yeah,
and there's that famous tape of him talking to Morris Schenker with Dorfman, and he said, Alan's a nice guy. He's not the kind of guy that do that, but the people that got a piece of Alan, they are that kind of guy. That kind of a subtle threat, not angry,
right,
screaming, intimidating, but intimidating on a real low key scale. To me, a guy like that's scarier. He said, you say you're 72, you want to reach 73, you got to do what you got to do, the right thing here.
I was to Chicago. You know what I mean when he was to Chicago. Should have been off the pot, We either did what we got coming or we didn't do what we got coming. Because whatever we got coming, all it comes to the people here. You have to find a way to pay it. The nicest guy in the world, but on the other hand, nobody's going to make me do anything. I never did business with them. That's true. I did business with Hopper. Then you do it with him. I did it with Hopper, and Hopper said, do it in. Excuse me, I just heard to bring a message back. You can fight the system if you want. But I'll tell you one thing. You said you're 72 and you'd be fired. All you can do is send a guy to beat a jail. One guy. If you don't own that, you got nothing to worry about. You will reach 73 then. There's no problem. Listen, you're a lawyer. You've been around St. Louis a long time. You got a place to go for help. I was not that type of a guy. But the people got a piece of him. I'm that type of a guy. You know what I mean?
I think that Lombardo was probably the most powerful mob capo in the country. He had control of the Central States Pension Fund, and he was also responsible for Las Vegas. And that was four hotels and casinos. I think that was a tremendous amount of responsibility for any individual mob guy, for any boss, but he was a capo at the time. He was over top of Spilatro, and he was over top of Alan Dorfman, which was the Central States. If you wanted a loan from the Teamsters, you had to go through Dorfman, who was owned by Lombardo. So you had to talk to Lombardo. Every mob figure in the country had to go through Lombardo. Now, I might get some pushback from this, but that's my personal feelings, is that Lombardo probably had the greatest responsibility for the most amount of money of most any mob capo in the country.
Yeah, for his level, I think Iupa was the boss at the time.
Right.
Cardo was still alive, but behind the scenes, I believe he was still alive then. But I mean, in some things, like if Nick Savella, Kansas City, needed to talk, he would talk to Iupa. He didn't go to Lombardo. Although Lombardo and Dorfman did come down here once, I believe.
Yeah.
But he would go talk to Iupa. But other than that, Lombardo handled things, and he was kind of like almost like the underboss over all the Teamster stuff and the Las Vegas stuff. And because what we're going to talk about next is the attempted bribery of the Nevada Senator Howard Cannon, because they were frantically trying to get all the political connections they could out in Nevada because they had so much business out there and wanted to do more business and no more business. They were making so much money out of Nevada that they needed good political connections in Nevada. And Joey Lombardo engaged in this conspiracy to bribe the senator, and along with a couple of other of Dorfman's people. There's a guy named Andrew Massa, called him Amos Massa. He was a trucking company executive. I don't really remember much. He was Teamsters Pension Fund trustee, I believe.
I think he was. And you had trucking deregulation coming through, and you had Howard Cannon sitting at the head of the Commerce Commission. Right. Once trucking deregulation came through, you could get these massive conglomerates eating up all the small firms. I mean, that would really remove all these little laws that set trucking prices and protected regional trucking firms. I mean, trucking regulation really protected the small trucker. It really created a middle class among truckers. And without those regulations, and I think that it was a good thing for truckers' pay. But without that trucking regulation, it really lost a lot of the local trucking firms that the mob control. And Lombardo saw that coming. A lot of the mob did, and they figured if they bribed the head of the Commerce Committee, they could get him to vote against Jimmy Carter's plan to deregulate trucking. Yeah, Jimmy Carter wanted to deregulate it because inflation was such a bad idea, was such a bad thing during the 70s that he thought that would lower prices so much because then you could import from overseas.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, the whole thing about even continues the modern day about how the conservative and liberal views of government and society, right, and how much government regulation should you have, and the conservatives would say less regulation, the more money the companies could make, which then they supposedly will hand on down to their employees and stimulate the economy. It's kind of a part of a bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is. I think that it's odd to think that the mob would, in that instance, fall on the side of the liberals, when a lot of their beliefs tended to fall on the side of conservative Italian values in a way. But it's a strange way of how their political ideologies lined up at the time.
Well, they say politics makes strange bedfellows, right? I know you've read that somewhere, Shakespeare, probably. And another conspirator in this was a guy named Thomas F. O'Malley, who was Chicago police. He was a former cop, and he was a Teamsters pension fund trustee. And somehow he was part of this conspiracy. He was probably going to help provide the cash money to buy this big piece of property, because what they did, they bought a piece of property that Cannon wanted. He lived in a neighborhood, and the neighborhood did not want a high rise or something going in. And they bought the property, and then they were going to turn around and make sure Cannon got it for a nice price. Now, they never did get the deal consummated. Something happened before it actually got done. And they used Cannon as a witness in this deal rather than as actually taking the bribe.
It was greed that Palmieri, who had taken over the pension fund by then, wanted $1.6 million. Howard Cannon wanted to pay $1.4 million. That was as high as he could go. And if the mob had just come up with $200,000 of their own money and loaned it or given it to Cannon, they would have gotten the deal. They could have stopped They could have stopped the trucking deregulation, but they were so greedy they couldn't come up with $200,000 to consummate the deal. And so Palmieri, the company that took over because the pension fund was so corrupt, wouldn't accept $1.4 million for that land, and that mob greed is what really prevented that deal.
Yeah, interesting. And Roy Lee Williams from Kansas City was indicted on this case too. Matter of fact, that's what will eventually turn him. He gets emphysema really bad, and by the end, he gets this big long 55. I think he got a 50-year sentence out of the deal. He had a lot of time to do, and he comes in. He ends up testifying, and mainly in front of Congress and at the Skim trial. So. This whole attempted bribery of Howard Cannon really brought a lot of people down, and so to me, and it's not too long after all this comes out, it's just a short period of time after all this comes out that these guys are indicted for this, that Irv Weiner and Alan Dorfman are going to lunch one day. Couple of guys are stalking them. There's several reports that these guys are stalking them just before, right out of the Chicago Outfit playbook. They are good. They stalk and they watch and they wait, and they're stalking them. And then somebody runs up behind Dorfman and Weiner walking across the parking lot and shoots Dorfman in the back of the head with a .22 and then throws the .22 away. I mean, talk about mark through Chicago hit, don't you think, Cam?
Yeah, I think that I don't think this is a robbery. I think that if Weiner was present, the outfit was in on it. I think that this was a real professional job.
I asked you, what do you think? Speculation. Do you think Weiner set him up? Oh
yeah.
There's no doubt.
Yeah, I think Weiner said, "I'll take him to lunch. I'll tell you where he's going to be. He's going to be at the Purple Hyatt, which was then a famous hotel. And you guys come across the parking lot. I'll distract him, and you get him."
And they had to surveil just in case, because, for example, Dorfman took a little side trip that wasn't announced. He wanted to go to a video store or something, but they were trailing along behind because they had witnesses that picked out these guys in another area where Dorfman and Weiner were just before they went to the Hyatt and parked over there. So here we are, somebody kills Dorfman. Who killed him and why? And I came up with this wiretap from Pendorf, I guess. And it's Alan Dorfman, a guy named Saul Schwartz, discussing who the next head of the outfit's going to be. And this was before Dorfman was killed. And the outfit would have had this, some of their lawyers, in discovery, you got to give up at least the transcripts on all these to the lawyers. And, if you remember back with the deal in the Donnie Brasco and Quack Quack Ruggiero.
Yeah.
People got killed. Castellano thought that Ruggiero was doing drugs, and he knew that the Bureau had wiretaps and there was a case going, and the lawyers now had those wiretaps, and Castellano wanted to see those transcripts, and Gotti knew that Ruggiero it would be known that he was dealing drugs.
That both of them were, yeah.
And so, whenever you have these cases and in discovery, then the mob is looking at discovery. Other people in the mob are looking at the discovery to find out what all is going on. They want to know what the Bureau knows, but they also want to know in general, what the Bureau knows and the government knows and what they know about other things that they may be doing to give them clues. So, and in this case, they could have gotten hold of this transcript that I've got here. And Dorfman is not too complimentary about Jackie Cerrone. I noticed that. Right. And what they're doing is discussing, who's going to take over the outfit, because Iupa's had a heart attack. At this time, Iupa had a heart attack. And we know that from public sources, also know that because Nick Savella and Cork went to Chicago during this time to meet with Iupa to talk about them putting together a package of some investors that they would be behind, and they would buy out Chicago's interest in the Stardust. They would be able to buy the Stardust from Glick, and they would take over Chicago's interest. And so they go to a relative of Nick Savella's, a guy named Anthony Schiavola, who's actually a Chicago policeman, another policeman here in Chicago. And they were going to go to his house. I released on YouTube the wiretap recently of Schiavola talking to his son, Anthony Jr., about checking for surveillance outside his house just before Jackie Cerrone and Joey Iupa were going to get there. And Nick Savella, as he was coming in, he calls and checked, did you brush the streets? He said, I'm going to go out and brush them again. And when they got there, the Bureau had the room where they thought they were going to meet bugged, but it was on the second floor. It would have been the natural place for him to go. But Iupa, his heart was so bad, he didn't think he should walk up even one flight of stairs. So they had the meeting on another floor. As Bill Owsley said, it would have been nice to have a wiretap or a tape and a recording of the head of the Kansas City Mafia talking to the boss of the Chicago outfit. That would have been done. That would have been gold, wouldn't it? Oh my God.
Yeah, the equivalent of a commission meeting in New York.
Really. So Dorfman's discussing who's going to be the next boss in Chicago with this Saul Schwartz. So Saul Schwartz is just my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, he's just an underling in the Amalgamated Insurance Company. I read up a little bit about him. He seemed to be dealing with a culinary workers union out west, and he ends up getting indicted for offering kickbacks to the leader of this union if Amalgamated can manage their pension fund, and they like sell them insurance and that kind of thing, and they'll give this culinary union president kickback. So I mean, the whole thing was just rife with corruption, wasn't it?
Yeah, he knew Dorfman, and you can tell by these transcripts we read that he knew enough to sort of be dangerous, as they say, but he really was prodding Dorfman for more information.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Now listen, here's Dorfman. I'll tell you something. My department, we got some other serious problems. This guy here is very sick. That means Iupa. We figured out. Schwartz said, yeah, who takes over? Dorfman says, well, that's the big problem. Schwartz, you mean there's a fight among themselves? Dorfman, well, there's no fight as of now, but normally there's a normal new president. But I know that all the young ones are here, right here. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, they got from the West. It must be got in from the West, right, which would have to be Spilatro. And so who else? Maybe Shiro, Paulie the Indian was out from the West. But so Schwartz says, well, what's he got? Cancer? He had a heart attack. And that's how we're sure he's talking about Iupa, because Iupa had a heart attack about this time. Well, he's home now. He's under doctor's supervision. He said, that's what I'm quoting him now. I haven't seen him. So what about Joey? Could this guy be affected? That's Schwartz asking, could Joey, being Joey Lombardo, could he be affected by this, right, this transition? So, well, he won't be affected, but only if, well, how are they related? Schwartz, he's asking all these questions. I think Dorfman would be kind of suspicious. Well, why he's asking all these questions? But Dorfman's kind of playing the, I'm an in guy. I know what's
right. That
on.
ego.
Yeah. So, well, how are they related? Well, they're guys not, they're guys that's pushed up. You see, the exasperating part about it is that I pleaded 2 years ago, as you well know, to come back home because he had been the heir apparent. Well, it's too late now, too late. So you think come back home 2 years ago and been the heir apparent, you think that's Spilatro?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
He was really the anointed one for a long time. And, he even went to Accardo and asked him as much. I mean, Spilatro was really a fast riser during that. I mean, there's really very little question that he was considered the guy for a long time, that he was being prepped for that role.
So Dorfman says, I think Joey's upset about it, very upset because, Joey was made some promises that I'm really shouldn't get into that. But I detect from my conversation that, and Schwartz finishes the sentence, he's not happy. So Lombardo's not happy. Dorfman said, he's unhappy. He's unhappy because of the guy's illness. He probably is unhappy the fact that he hadn't been given more authority. He assumed he'd be having that are currently taking place because Joey, I said to him, what's bothering you? Tell me what's what? Well, Alan, I don't like the way things are happening. All right. So we're ready. In case. So I'm not sure,
you hear a lot of these guys, these young guys, these Lombardo would have been in his 50s. But a lot of these guys always say, well, you kill 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these guys and you can take over the whole thing. I mean, you hear that from Chicago to New York. They all have this plan that if they whacked a couple of guys, then they could take over. And it's a pipe dream that a lot of them have. And you kind of got to wonder if Lombardo had that sort of pipe dream too, that we're ready, if we had to, we're ready to either take over if they give it to us, or we're ready if we have to make some moves, we can make them.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that we were promised some stuff, so somebody promised him something. Here's an interesting question from Schwartz. I thought there's a regular line of ascendancy, isn't there? There's a Dorfman replies, no. That's only at the districts that there is, but when a particular one is selected, it's with the consent of the areas, Now that means that, like, if you like a capo and somebody in the crews under lower down, there is kind of a regular line of ascendancy. But when it comes to the overall boss, that you don't have a regular line. You can reach down under Lombardo, take Spilatro. Because as Dorfman goes on, say a lot of guys don't want it,
Lombardo was the street boss at the time, too,
right.
is what you got to remember. So the street boss, I guess that's why they're talking about there's a regular order of things. I mean, you'd think the street boss would move up to the underboss and would then move up to higher. And Lombardo is not being given that role that he thought he deserved.
Yeah, interesting. Bless, at this point in time, La Pietra and Jackie Cerrone were both intimately involved with the scam. Whereas some of the Al Piolato and a lot of these other guys, that were doing the deal out there, they were not involved with the scam
Right.
at all. I've seen,
Right.
that whole case file, and there is no mention anybody and on the telephones and people that got cases were Jackie Cerrone and La Pietra and Lombardo and Iupa. And that was it in Chicago. So they're the ones that they have more power than anybody else, I would say, because that was, they had that money coming in for them. They probably weren't sharing it to anybody under them.
Right. Guys like Solano and Pilato were really high up in the laborers unions. Solano was head of the National, and Pilato was pretty high up too, but they were not part of the skim.
So this next sentence, Dorfman says, I'll see, that's in response to, after he says, some guys don't want it, they're under the gun. You take indications are right now because, the obvious one would have been the guy who died, Turk. Turk would have been the obvious one that would have taken over, but he's dead. So the other two I can see on the horizon would be, the guy from the South Side or Jackie. Neither of them have the authority to do neither one. So Turk Torello, right? What was the story with him? I can't really remember.
Turk Torello died of cancer suddenly. He was in his 40s. He was a real fast riser. He was basically anointed. He was considered the guy who was going up, and he was given a tremendous amount of responsibility, and he was considered the one who was going to move on. That was more or less understood. And he was being groomed, as they would say. And then he died of cancer. He's in that photo, the Last Supper photo, Turk Torello. He was the capo of the Chinatown crew. And after him was the other guy that would have been the South Side. It's Chinatown. The other guy who took over was Angelo Pietra, who was, as you just said, was responsible for the skim and had built the Italian-American social club and a tremendous amount of money and tremendous amount of power, and would have been a natural candidate for taking over also. He was a real well-respected guy.
So the next one would be Schwartz says Jackie would. No, Jackie has a lot of limitations, too hot-headed. So here's where I just wonder if Jackie Cerrone found out Dorfman was talking about him like this. He said he had a lot of limitations. So obviously, Dorfman doesn't really have a say-so, but he's bad-mouthing him. He says he's too unconfined and make too many judgments that are not in everybody's best interest. And where this guy's just reversed. Go ahead.
Yeah, he was also a bit of a drinker.
I've heard that. That also makes him unreliable. So he's talking, I don't know, he's got to be talking about, here's a guy he'll listen, and reevaluates and re-listens, evaluate, and sometimes, as much as a month or two will go by before he gives an answer. Unless somebody, it's an absolute urgency. Well, he's very calculated in his thinking, which Jackie is not. So you think he's comparing Jackie to somebody that's really calculated in their thinking? You think it's with La Pietra?
Yeah, I think based on that, Gary, better than I do, how hard it is to read transcripts and listen to audio and know exactly how, compared to being in person and having conversations and follow somebody. But I think that it does sound like, because he's going from the guy from the South Side and Jackie, that it does sound like he's comparing the South Side to Jackie.
And it goes on. The other guy out south, I think, there'll be an open war. He's a real, and Schwartz fills it in, shoot him up.
Yeah.
So that La Pietra, and this last one, Schwartz says, act mean, act tough, talking about La Pietra. And that's really kind of how he was.
Oh, yeah.
My understanding of his reputation. Another speculation about him, Angelo.
The
Hook is Jerry Scalise and that Art Rachel went to England, and they stole that huge big diamond and did this multi-million-dollar diamond theft. And they mailed that stuff back on their way to the airport. They got caught as soon as they landed and did a lot of time and never told anybody. way later in life, La Pietra is dead. His widow is still living in the same home that's described as a compound, impregnable compound is described. And Jerry Scalise has put a crew back together, and the bureau is all over them. They were scouting some armored cars and some other big time robberies to do with his crew. And they catch him doing a home invasion at La Pietra's home with his widow inside. I have to wonder if La Pietra might have ripped him off on that jewelry thing or something. I just can't imagine why he would go to rob the guy's widow. You got any ideas on that?
You know, a lot of those outfit guys, it's not like they could go to the bank, so they had stacks of cash. And, you know, they found stacks of cash at Frank Calabrese's house years after he died. Junior pointed them out, and he said, told them how to find it. I believe they found $800,000 in cash. So it wouldn't have been unusual for them to find hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash in mob boss's house. Well, that's a good speculation. That's interesting, Gary. I had never thought about that. But I think at the very least, he would have found a hell of a lot of cash in that house.
He would have. There's no doubt, but I mean,
it sounds personal. You're right. That's damn good.
It seemed personal to me.
Yeah.
I mean, you take out a guy's widow like that. I mean,
yeah.
And he wasn't ever an informant. He did his time. He did a lot of time, and maybe even died in penitentiary. Died shortly after he got out from the skim investigation. So, and he was really an important guy at one time. So I think it just seemed personal to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
So this last sentence Dorfman says, and then the tape cuts off. I'm curious about your thought on this. And the Greek obviously will never get it, because he's Greek. The most logical guy was the little guy. So the little guy is always going to be Spilatro, I think, in that world. Even they called him that in Kansas City, a little T or the little guy or T. But the Greek, who would the Greek be at this point in time?
The Greek is Gus Alex. He was part of that ruling triumvirate of Accardo and Iupa.
Okay.
For those of you who listen, I am getting it right nowadays. I've gotten some criticism.
Iupa.
Iupa.
Don't say Iupa.
That's right. Not Iupa anymore, but it is Iupa. And the Greek would have been Gus Alex, who was the brain trust. But there's the cat. He got his way in. She did make her way in. So, but Gus Alex was the brain trust. He was the smart one. He knew all the gambling. He knew all the angles. He had all the political connections. But he was the Greek. He could not have made it to the top of the list. But he was about as high ranking as a non-Italian could be.
Interesting. That was a really interesting conversation, I thought. And guys, I'm going to attach the whole conversation, the audio, and you can listen for yourselves. And I'll put the transcript on the show notes. Be pretty long show notes, but I'll put the transcript in there so you can make your own speculation. I just.
It's damn interesting audio. It's probably the most interesting I've ever heard.
Yeah, I think so. Again, as you said, though, Cam, it's so hard. You gotta, if you don't have really a lot of good inside knowledge about these conversations, you don't have a storyteller. You can wiretap all day long, and you can bug all day long. And if you don't have a storyteller, somebody to say this is what that means, it's really hard. They just never give up that, that golden conversation for the most part. I've got a few golden conversations with Peckerwood, Carl Thomas talking to Nick Savella about skimming from Las Vegas casinos. But these mob guys, the real guys that they're really involved close, they never really say exactly what they mean. It's
Yeah, it's like in New York when they point to the chin for Gigante. They know what they're supposed to say and what they're not, because they know that they're all what they could always be recorded.
Nowadays, my partner and I got some other serious problems we got here in pretty soon. Oh yeah? You think so? That's a big problem. Yeah, the plan was how they relate. If their guy is not the guy that's, pushed up. The exasperating part about it is that I pleaded 2 years ago to come back home. Because he would have been the heir apparent. It's too late now. It's too late now. And Joey is very, very good about it. He and Joey would make some promises that are not, I'm not desperate into that, but I could detect from my conversations with him that he's unhappy. He is unhappy. He's unhappy because of the guy's doing. He's probably unhappy in the fact that he has been given more authority. That he assumed that he was going to be happy. That are currently taking place. Because Joey, I took up a father and tell me what to do. Well, I don't like when things are happening. Radio communication. But the regular line of the sentences, no, that's only as the difference. There it is. But when a particular one is selected, it would be extent of all of the areas. I don't want it. I mean, there you go. You take indications are right now, the obvious one would have been the guy who died. That would have been the obvious one that would have taken over. And so he's dead. The only other two that I could see on the horizon would be the guy from the south side or Jackson. Neither which have the authority to do it. And neither one. Jackie. No, Jackie has a lot of sympathy. Make too many judgments that are not in everybody's best interest. This guy is just reversed. This is a guy who'll listen, and evaluate, and re-listen, and evaluate. And sometimes, as much as most people might as well give you an answer. I mean, let's say it's an absolute urgency. But he's very, very calculated in his thinking. Which Jackie is not. The last 6-7 months, maybe, it's the contrary. Really? Yeah. I'm really not that impressive. And the guy outside, I think was the long war. He's the real issue of us. The Greek obviously will never get it, but Greek. So, the most logical guy was that. It's probably not about the island today.
It's damn interesting audio. It's probably the most interesting I've ever heard.
Yeah, I think so. Again, as you said, though, Cam, it's so hard. You gotta, if you don't have really a lot of good inside knowledge about these conversations, you don't have a storyteller. You can wiretap all day long, and you can bug all day long. And if you don't have a storyteller, somebody to say this is what that means, it's really hard. They just never give up that, that golden conversation for the most part. I've got a few golden conversations with Peckerwood, Carl Thomas talking to Nick Savella about skimming from Las Vegas casinos, but these mob guys, the real guys that are really involved close, they never really say exactly what they mean. It's
yeah. Yeah, it's like in New York when they point to the chin for Gigante.
Gigante.
They know what they're supposed to say and what they're not, because they know that they're all what they could always be recorded.
There's a lot of that guys, that guy over
Right,
there,
right.
that guy there. Of course, the funniest one, I've got that wiretap of Tuffy DeLuna and Joe Agosto trying to come up with the code names for flights coming in. And it's got to be the funniest line I ever heard is United. He said, "What the fuck's a good U?" Unger, Mr. Unger. Somebody must have watched The Odd Couple at the time. Felix Unger.
Right.
Well, it's been a lot of fun, Cam. I appreciate
Absolutely.
you speculating with me on this. Who knows? I mean, I'm sure he was killed for mainly because they were so afraid of him testifying, because they were looking at getting a lot of time on that Howard Cannon thing. I think he had another case pending at the time. And Alan Dorfman was a multi-millionaire, had lived this life of luxury for a long time and power. And now he's looking at going to the penitentiary for basically the rest of his life. And he's around 60 some years old. So I can understand where they might want to take him out. And of course, he did not ever swear to any kind of omerta. He did not have that code. You had to just depend on him. They'd sent him a message a few years ago with a bomb on another case.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. I think he did a little time, not a lot.
Yeah, a little over a year.
Yeah.
On that Pendorf, that Howard Cannon case.
But no, it wasn't on the Howard Cannon. He was just getting ready to be sentenced on that.
No, yeah, that's what it was. It was union funds. That's what it was.
It was some union funds, thing. Yeah. I couldn't
remember. That's right.
It wasn't a big case.
It was on the Pendorf. It was union funds.
But bad mouth Jackie Cerrone like that, it probably wasn't hard to get Cerrone to cooperate.
I think he went along with it pretty easily.
So be careful what you say. Mobsters out there, it may end up in court and your buddies may get to see it. There's been more than one that gossip a little bit up on the phone and it gets leaked out. Well, that's what they used to turn Sammy the Bull.
That's right.
Was Gotti talking about, you're going to basically sacrifice Gravano. And there's been more than one. The Bureau they get some kind of something that sounds like you're out. That's how they turned Frank. Collada. They took him that tape.
That's right.
And they said, you got to clean your laundry out there. And then he knows what that means. If Tony Spilatro's got to clean his own laundry, he's got to clean up the guys that can testify against him. And Collada was a guy that could really bring him in on a lot of stuff. And so they take those tapes around and then use them to turn people. I remember we had one here. Jimmy DiCapo was a gambler, and he was down at Jefferson City, a state prison for something. The Bureau got this, and they were worried about him. He took it to him. He said, I ain't worried about that. It doesn't always work, but it works many times. Probably works more often than not. Because if they're going to kill you, you got nothing left to lose.
That's right. That's right.
All right, Cam, I appreciate it. And guys, I always appreciate y'all listening and keep coming back. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and like it. And tell your friends, tell two or three of your friends about this podcast and YouTube channel. Don't forget to always look out for motorcycles. Maybe hit me up on Venmo at Gangline Wire or buy me a cup of coffee on that app. Check my website out. I don't know. If you have any problems with PTSD and you're a vet, Google PTSD and go to the Veterans Administration website, and you'll find a lot of help. A hotline, you'll find a lot of help. So thanks a lot, Cam.
Absolutely, Gary. I had a great time.